What's up, everybody? What's up, MGTOW? So I'm making this video as a response or more of a clarification to some comments that I made, and I wanted to script the video to make sure that I get the points as good as possible. And this is a response to comments made by OldManFlappyNuts, and it's basically in context of a video made by a content creator who has presented a new, unique take on gas booting and using the fame of said gas bootings as a mating strategy. Now, I'm using the term gas bootings because I find it kind of interesting that some people can endorse gas bootings on their channel and not get any strikes or anything from YouTube, while other people can put government statistics in their video and get their entire channel banned. So I find that interesting within itself. But back to this new unique take on gas bootings as a mating strategy, I do see some problems with the logic of this overall as a plan to somehow, quote unquote, make society more moral. As I see it, this strategy is a selfish and cowardly way to access reproduction through the use of psychological manipulation. Now, the content creator in question has made the claim that gas booters are brave men who are somehow going to bring social awareness to the corruption of government, the corruption of the elite, which are leading society down a rather dysgenic road of cuckoldry, single motherhood, all the while they're living under a different set of rules themselves, including getting interest-free loans from central banks. There's also high-level collusion between the state and corporate powers, and of course the suppression of technology and medicine. So as I'm making this video upon request by OldManFlappyNuts for clarification, it's also under the consideration that I have personally seen said content creator help another man overcome suicide, which ironically now he's endorsing suicide, which I find, again, very ironic or hypocritical in a sense. And I also think that one of the main goals of MGTOW should be to help men not to commit suicide due to the pressures of society and all the types of things that men commit suicide for in the modern day. And also because I think that this content creator has a lot of good ideas and is also very knowledgeable about a lot of things going on in the world, and he's a pretty cool guy too. So I think that it would be a shame to lose somebody like him from the conversation of MGTOW and also just in general. My main contention with his argument is his use of the word brave when describing gas booters, because I think that bravery by definition involves risk. I mean, what else is bravery if it's not taking a risk, and oftentimes taking a risk in which the odds are not stacked in the person's favor? For example, going to the bodega to buy a pack of gum can hardly be called brave. Throwing a ping pong ball into the wind is also not requiring any bravery. And I think that most, if not all people, would agree that bravery involves some type of risk. So, it is on these grounds that I make the claim that gas booters are not brave, because making a surprise attack on unarmed people does not require any risk at all, thereby negating the use of the word brave to describe such acts. One could make the case that killing oneself requires some bravery. However, the act of attacking unarmed people and the act of killing yourself are two separate acts and should not be conflated as one act. Therefore, this negates the claim that a gas booter's semen should be valued as semen of a brave man, since the only thing that could be labeled as brave is the act of killing oneself. Yet I don't think that passing on of suicidal genes is of much benefit to society or to the offspring themselves. Secondly, to this point, is the fact that any children created through this strategy would also be lacking their biological father, which is something that is statistically proven to create a less safe and stable environment for the child's upbringing. And combining this with the fact that they already have suicidal genes, quote unquote, that would highly reduce the chances of this child having success in the world, because they'd be born to a single mother and they'd have these genes, quote unquote, that would lead them to commit suicide, because that's the only thing that they're, quote unquote, brave about is committing suicide, not gas booting a bunch of people. So in other words, this mating strategy is illogical, and it's also antithetical to MGTOW philosophy. So as I said earlier, the use of psychological deception to gain access to reproduction is more of a blue pill idea. In regards to the fact that this act is not brave by my definition, and requires the use of the devious, deceptive media and playing into their narrative to provide coverage of the event. And that's the only way that this gas booter is going to become famous, and his status that he gains through this act of gas booting is only playing into the narrative of the media, and it's not an actual act of courage or bravery, because like I said, it's not brave. Gas booting is not brave. So therefore, his claim that using gas booting as a mating strategy to replenish society with brave, courageous men is a false claim. And in fact, his strategy would be replenishing society with deceptive, cowardly men, something that this same content creator rails on and on about in his own videos, claiming that society needs less deceptive men, less cowardly men, thereby making himself a hypocrite in the process of advocating for this strategy. And also, anyone who uses this strategy is selfish and not doing anything productive for society, and they're also creating a fatherless child. And the only reason why they're doing this is to selfishly pass on their own not brave genes, because they're not brave. And moreover, if the gas booter in question happens to have MGTOW or red pill knowledge, this would also be a drain on society, since such men are sorely needed in times like these. And more so, this strategy is only going to lead towards less freedom for society as a whole, more centralized political government, more police, and more military control, which will lead to more corruption, which centralized government and political and military control always leads to more corruption. It will lead to more taxation and more regulation, which all three of these things are anti-moral. So this strategy would lead to a less moral society, therefore making this plan an anti-moral plan, which is going to bring more corruption, more tyranny onto society, contradicting the claims of said creator, in which he claims that he wants to create a quote-unquote more moral society with more brave men in it. And this strategy is going to create a less moral society with less brave men in it. So, in short, I can understand some of the frustrations people have with the current political climate, especially in regards to men's freedom from tyranny. And if the pinnacle of MGTOW is stacking gold and banging sex dolls till you die alone in a bed full of gold and sex dolls, I can kind of see why someone might want to commit suicide instead of doing that. However, claiming that gas booters are brave is a false claim. And also claiming that gas booters will create a more moral society is a provably false claim. So therefore, the claim that women should value gas booter sperm is also a false claim if the claim is that impregnating women with gas booter sperm would generate a more moral society, when in fact, it would be creating an anti-moral, selfish society. And this strategy is anti-moral and selfish, and it's only to gain access to reproduction, which is pretty blue pill if you ask me. So to OldManFlappyNuts, I don't think that peaceful resolution is impossible at this point, but I'm also not saying that it will be easy. However, increasing tyranny and decreasing freedom will only make it more difficult. And then the most freedom-loving and the most brave men will be killed during a violent revolution, thereby counteracting the main goal of said content creator, which is to increase the amount of brave men and reduce the amount of corruption and tyranny in society. So you can see how logically this does not follow. It's just basically a selfish way to get your sperm in some girl's pussy, which is blue pill. You're using deception, you're using illogic, you're using violence, which are all blue pill ideas of how to get pussy. And that's how I see it, and I think that I've presented a pretty logical case as to why I think that. So I'm sure there'll be some disagreements. Let me know in the comments section. Alright, so this second part of the video is going to be a response directly to Redshift's video responding to comments. Now, the first part of the video that I made, which was responding to OldManFlappyNuts comments I made before I saw Redshift's video responding to comments. And so this is just going to be more directly responding to Redshift's response to my comments. So I also appreciate the fact that Redshift did take the time to respond to my comments. And so I'll get into my response now. So first off, I think that we're just going to have to disagree on the definition of what the word brave means. Because to you, Redshift, it seems that taking any action at all in the world is considered brave. Now, if you saw the first part of the video, you can see my points as to why I disagree with that, but I digress. So one of the points that I do agree with you on is that the so-called elite should be held to the same standards as everyone else when it comes to the legal system. One of the main problems is the fact that there are no private militaries or private security firms that operate under natural law and or just war theory. So in instances like, say, a rich guy has a bunch of teenage girls trapped on his private island and the government refuses to investigate, then a private military should be able to be hired in order to investigate violations of natural law, like theft, kidnap, murder, rape, things of that nature. Especially when civil police or military fail to investigate. Also, on the problem with voting is that voting can be rigged through gerrymandering, voter fraud, political campaign lying, and other things. And if people can't withhold taxes, then voting becomes irrelevant because the government just takes your money and reallocates it to programs that are against your own interest, like, for example, reallocating your tax money to single moms to pay for welfare taxes, and then you wonder why you can't get a girlfriend. So, seeing how these two situations are not changeable by force, perhaps a capitalist solution is possible. So many ANCAPs focus on the anarchy side of things and not the capitalist side of things. And personally, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, not an anarcho-fascist, because, well, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So how the system is set up, the reason you can't stop paying taxes is because the police and the military are dependent on tax money. So therefore, threatening to not pay taxes becomes a direct threat to the military and the police, as their livelihood depends on getting tax money. So a capitalist solution would be to change this by offering the police or military a better deal than the government is willing to offer them, which could take the form of allowing them to work in relatively crime-free neighborhoods, and also by paying them higher salaries than the government in sound money like gold and silver. This is probably one of the reasons that the government started breaking up local police forces and transferring cops out of the towns that they live in, and also transferring more experienced cops out of neighborhoods with the most crime, to make it so that the police don't have a real reason to care about the places that they're policing. And also, by taking the experienced cops out of the high crime neighborhoods, the unexperienced cops are more likely to shoot people because they don't have the same investigative skills and they don't know the criminals. Like back in the day when it used to be that it was local cops and local gangs, there was a lot of collusion between the police and the gangs, but there was also a lot of cooperation between the police and the gangs. And, the high-ranking cops knew the high-ranking gang members, and they kind of had like not like a truce, but a certain code of conduct, not killing innocent people, not, only killing other gang members. And, that makes sense to me. I mean, if you're in a drug gang and you're doing a deal with another drug gang and some drug dealers get shot, I mean, who cares? That's what you chose to live by. But, nowadays, gang members do drive-by shootings and shoot innocent people, and they don't even have good aim because they're trying to pretend like they're in a movie and they're shooting with one hand sideways and all this other stuff. I mean, and then plus you have the inexperienced cops policing those neighborhoods because the experienced cops get transferred out into the nice neighborhoods, and then you can see how that creates a huge problem. But anyhow, rich people, they bribe the politicians, they bribe the police, and that's how they get the laws changed in their favor. But the thing is, they're so greedy that I doubt that a lot of that bribe money trickles down to regular cops. So, for instance, let's say a person or a group of people could, crowdsource on like GoFundMe or something a couple $100,000 and then donate that to the local police to turn a blind eye to, let's say, a few neighborhood dads running down on a house that has known Muslim grooming gangs. And well, if the cops turn a blind eye and they get a little extra pay and stuff like that to turn a blind eye to that, and then a couple neighborhood dads bust into a place where, their daughters are being held against their will, I think that fathers always have a natural right to go anywhere where their underage children are being held and go enter that place by force and take their children home. I mean, that's a natural right of fathers to, if they feel like their children are in danger, they should have the right to enter any place by force and, take their children home. And the fact that the police stop them from doing that has a lot to do with their paycheck. So like I was saying, if you could crowdsource a couple $100,000 and donate that money to the police force to have them, take a coffee break while a couple dads run into one of these places, I mean, who's to say that's wrong? I don't think that's wrong. I mean, even in Central America, they have private police forces. Like, for instance, pharmacies have private police forces because a lot of times they get robbed and the police don't have a lot of money in Central America to buy fancy guns and stuff like they do here in the United States. So the pharmacies actually pay, I saw pharmacies where they had guys standing outside with semi-automatic rifles like AK-47s and stuff like that, standing right outside the pharmacy. And they weren't police, they were just private security. And also, some of the neighborhoods have private police, which kind of just like walk around at night and check and make sure everything's okay when the police aren't patrolling those areas. Also, the private police would allow for protection against rich people. so that rich people couldn't enforce laws on middle class and poor people that the rich people themselves aren't following, which I think is one of the main arguments against corrupt elites. If you're quote unquote better than other people, you should definitely be able to win without cheating. And no, I'm not saying that all wealth is ill-gotten, but it does seem that when you research into the political arena, there is a lot of corruption, a lot of collusion, a lot of bribery going on. You know, for instance, the Clintons, I mean, how did they become billionaires when a president or a senator only gets paid, like $50,000 a year? That doesn't equate to becoming a billionaire. So obviously there's some type of corruption, collusion, something going on behind the scenes that they can gain that much wealth through serving in public office. It just doesn't add up. $50,000 a year for 4 years doesn't add up to $1 billion. I'm bad at math, but I can do that in my head. And of course, there's a lot of corruption with the corporations as well. They're colluding with the policymakers and the lawmakers, and they're making laws. Like, I'm sure, like, this company that's supplying the paper straws in California, I'm sure they dropped a lot of donations in whatever politician's pocket to make sure that their paper straws made it into every store in California. And there's probably something more to it than just recycling, even though they're not recyclable, apparently. And because of this fact, how can they logically expect anyone else to follow the laws that they create when those laws benefit the people that create them and are unbeneficial to the people that follow them? It's just a complete illogical thing. Like, you expect me to follow a law that you made that you're not following, and the law is messing my life up, and you're benefiting from the law somehow being created, and you don't even have to follow it. Another problem is high property taxes in the city versus creating a community in an unincorporated rural area. The problem really being that if you add too many houses, too many large houses, and too many amenities, then the taxes go up. And also, if you add too many people, condensed populations always do require more regulations. It's just an unavoidable thing. When you have 1 million, 5 million people living in one place, you're going to have to make some type of laws to stop the idiots from ruining everything for everybody else. It's just it's like a real thing. It's not something that you can avoid. And you can't just run around having vigilante justice everywhere, because this is the difference between anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-fascism. Because I think that what you're describing more, Redshift, is anarcho-fascism, where you think that anyone should have the right to just kill anyone at any time. That's not anarchy. Anarchy means no rulers, not no rules. So there are rules. The rules are natural law. And the rule of natural law is don't attack anyone and defend yourself. So by you saying that you think that anybody should be able to kill anybody at any time for any reason, that's not natural law. That's just a bunch of BS. And that's anarcho-fascism. You're basically talking about Darwinism. You're just saying that anybody that can kill somebody should be able to kill somebody just because they can do it. That's Satanism. That's Luciferianism. That's solipsism. Saying, oh, well, if the strong can kill the weak, they should kill them just because. That's not moral. That's anti-moral. That's amoral. At best, it's really anti-moral. Now, anyone should be able to defend themselves against an attack, against somebody violating their rights, violating their space, violating their property. But to say that anyone should be able to kill anyone at any time for any reason, that's not anarchy. That's not natural law. If you're killing something to eat it, that's one thing. But if you're just killing people just to get rid of them because you don't like them, that's not anarchy. That's not natural law. That's something that you made up, or it's anarcho-fascism, where only the strong survive and the strong kill the weak all the time just because they feel like it. It's Satanism. So basically, you have the same philosophy as the so-called elites in the government. that they should be allowed to kill us. Why? Because they can. And that's the only reason why. There's no morals to it. There's no ethics to it. So you contradict yourself when you talk about wanting to have a more moral society and a more like cooperative society and a more productive society. And then the next thing you say is that anybody should be able to kill anybody at any time for any reason. That's Darwinism. That's Satanism. That's Luciferianism. Natural law means that you should be able to defend yourself with full force from an attack, from theft, from murder, but not that you can just kill anybody at any time for any reason just because you feel like it, because you don't like the way they look and maybe they should have dressed a little bit better and then you wouldn't have killed them. That's nonsense. So I digress. Really, the question here of building in unincorporated counties and things like that is the question of being able to create a low population rural community that's attractive to at least a subset of women, because that's what you're talking about. You want to build a community with families and things like that, you're going to need to attract some women. So this is really a difficult question. How can you build a low population kind of rural community that also has enough amenities to attract women there, and that where women are going to want to live there and stay there and have children there? But I think as the chaos rises in the cities and the cities become more overpopulated and more regulations, and especially once they stop, focusing all these laws to help women and they start focusing more on trans people and immigrants and all this other stuff that the left is focusing on, women are going to start to realize that the government's not there for them either, and the government was just using them, and they might become more attracted to living in these low population rural communities that red pill men start building. So this is one thing that so-called incels could do besides killing themselves. They could save up money and go off grid, which is still possible and it is still legal, and start building these off-grid communities, which would show that they're not just mad, that they're not part of the top 20%, and in fact that they have some value, and that their value is just being suppressed by the corrupt elite, which building a community with some amenities would show some women that, hey, look, they said that we were worth nothing, but look, we've built a small town, we've built a small city, and it's got, internet and plumbing and electricity and solar power, and we've got organic food here and cows and pigs and chickens. What else do you need? We got the internet, we got food, the air's clean out here, nice views, things like that. Those are things that would be attractive to women. And also it would create a healthier lifestyle for the men that live there as well. And there are real world examples of places like this, because for example, in New Mexico, I've been to the Earth Home city or town, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, they're left-wing, socialist, crazy nut jobs, whatever, but they've managed to build a town in an unincorporated part of New Mexico, and the government doesn't bother them. They have completely self-sufficient homes where they're collecting rainwater, and they built their houses out of adobe and basically adobe and tires, and they're really nice. Like, I would live in one of those houses easily. I mean, it's got every amenity you can think of, showers and electricity and internet and, fireplaces, and the views were very nice. They had fresh water, fresh air. So these are not just like imaginary things. Like, this is possible, but like I said earlier, it does take some effort. It's not like, oh, well, we own this city and the only problem is that these socialists live in the city. No, they built it too. Unions and things like that, and, different government type of plans built up those cities. So it's not like, oh, well, we built this stuff and they're just here messing it up. No, it's like, if you want to claim something, then you need to build it yourself. You need to go to some unincorporated land, some non-built land, which is very cheap to buy comparatively to buying an apartment in a city or buying a house in like San Francisco or something like that, and start building and prove to the world that you're worth something. instead of just sitting there and saying, oh, I gotta kill people because I'm not getting any pussy. Oh, what's the use of living if I don't get any pussy? That's not MGTOW, man. And yeah, I know you're talking about incels, but to me, incel is just part of the same problem. It's part of the same effects of feminism and the technological revolution and all these things. And so, in order to prove that you have worth, killing people is not the answer. Killing people is the weak man's way of saying, it's basically like like having an ad hominem in a debate. It's like you've lost the debate, and so now you're going to start cursing the people out and saying that, calling them names and stuff like that because you don't have any other points to make. And also, I see a lot of incels that have good jobs, better jobs than I have. They've got houses, and I even see incels that have children. So a lot of incels, it would be easier for them to save up money and buy some land and build off-grid than it would be for me even. And because of that, that's one reason why incels shouldn't kill themselves, is because they can do things like this. They can do things like build off-grid and show that they're worth something and possibly try to plan long-term planning for the future, because if the cities are going to keep getting worse and worse, there is going to be a subset of women that don't want to live in those cities anymore. And especially conservative women. They're not going to want to be jammed into these cities with a bunch of immigrants and illegal immigrants and all the left-wing people that are going nuts. And they're going to be looking for options. And if they see these communities built by red pill men that are strong men that are building something completely off grid and basically giving a finger to the government and saying, we don't need you. We don't need the government. We're self-sufficient out here on our own. Just like the earthship people are. Even though they're left-wing hippies or whatever, they're living off the grid. They don't need the government. So you can say what you want about them. So again, like I'm saying, it is wrong to say that so-called incels have no reason to live if they can't have sex right now. And you're the one that's talking about long-term thinking. And we need as many red pill men as possible to build these communities in the future, right now, and especially when more and more men start getting tired of paying taxes that are against their interest. And the so-called incels will be the first people to start building these new towns and trying out new forms of government like anarcho-capitalism or anarcho-fascism or whatever you want to do. And when women see that these guys helped contribute to opposing the government and started building their own communities, then maybe these men can get some respect from women the old-fashioned way, by being worth something, not by destroying society and reversing all of the accomplishments that supposedly your ancestors, your forefathers fought for, died for, built up. And besides that, how are you going to employ gene editing technology if you destroy society and set the United States back hundreds of years, almost to like the Stone Age or like the colonial period, by causing a civil war in the country and destabilizing the entire country and bringing us back to like I said, to like Civil War times, to like living in log cabins and stuff. You're not going to be able to get gene editing technology and increase everybody's IQ and make everybody's personality cool and nice and remove psychopathic genes from the gene pool if you destroy all the stuff that the scientists are going to need to make that technology in the first place. And like, I'm not even for gene editing technology, but that's something that you're for. And you're talking about long-term planning. But if you destroy society and you destroy all the stuff that we need to make this technology in the first place, that's again antithetical to your own plan. So just think it through a little bit more. Now, when you're talking about going against the government, right, through force, you're talking about rocket launchers and grenades. Like, really, man? Rocket launchers and grenades? The reality is the government has space-based lasers, bombs, missiles, drone robots, drone swarms, microwave and sonic guns, tanks, ATPs. Did I mention Tomahawk missiles, battle cruisers, F-16s, stealth bombers? They even have bayonets on fully automated Gatling guns with flamethrowers attached to them, and planes that can dust entire populations with diseases and toxic chemicals. And they have deep underground military bases where they'll hide and none of that will affect them. So basically, you'll be causing this civil war that will bring America back to the Stone Ages, kill off most of the people, and the people that are causing this, the people that are cheating the system in the first place, they'll be fine. They'll be relaxing in their deep underground military base, and they won't be affected. They won't. It's like this is a real reality of the world today, that they have deep underground military bases. Do you have a deep underground military base? Do you have space-based lasers? Do you have Tomahawk missiles? Do you have a battle cruiser, F-16, stealth bomber? Maybe you have a bayonet, but it's probably not attached to a fully automated Gatling gun with a flamethrower. So be realistic, man. Be realistic and stop just going on about taking out the government and people marching on Washington with rifles and handguns. Even if people had grenades and rocket launchers, it still wouldn't be enough. It still wouldn't be enough. Drone robots, drone swarms, microwave guns that they can shoot out and fry an entire city block full of people at one time. Tanks. Do you have any tanks? Do you have any ATPs? Okay, we get it. You don't have that stuff. Maybe you have a couple rifles, bulletproof vest, even a helmet, maybe some other body armor and stuff like that, but you don't have Tomahawk missiles. You don't. And if you do, let me know in the comment section. But then again, another thing that men with nothing to lose could do is actually show up at these government buildings. And they could either cause civil disobedience, or since they have nothing to lose, they could just spend all their time harassing senators and governors and congressmen and women and their local mayor. They could just spend all their time every day. When this guy wakes up and goes to work, he's going to see 10 incels sitting outside his office. Like, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. Hey, I need to talk to you. Every day, every single day. And then when they have them arrested, since they're not afraid to go to jail, then another 10 supposed incels will show up the next day and say, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. Hey, go to Washington and show up with suits on. Like 40, 50, 100, 200 incels, supposed incels, show up at Washington, D.C. outside the senator's offices. Say, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you every day. If they have nothing to lose, why spend their time in jail when they could actually be doing something productive? If they have nothing to lose and they don't care about losing their job and losing their life, why not spend all their time wearing a suit and going to Washington and saying, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. And maybe they'll get ignored and maybe they'll get arrested and maybe they'll get put in jail for doing it. And then another 20 will show up and say, hey, I mean, eventually somebody's going to have to listen to somebody. But when you start shooting people, people don't listen to what you have to say. Only a few other tiny, small minority of people that also feel the same exact way that you do are going to read your manifesto and look at it. And so this kind of leads into dialectical politics. Now, I thought somebody with advanced quote-unquote red pill knowledge like Redshift would be beyond dialectical politics, right and left, and, Democrat and Republican. Because just because the conservatives are buying more guns and liberals are pushing for more gun control isn't necessarily going to lead to a civil war. And gas booters are not engendering any sympathy from either side. They're not making people understand the plight of disenfranchised men when they go and shoot up a bunch of unarmed civilians. Sure, conservatives might be buying more guns, but the only reason why they're buying more guns is to protect their wives and children from supposedly crazed, sexless incels. They're not going to start a civil war. They're just buying more guns because now they think that there's a bunch of horny guys running around society that want to shoot their wife and shoot their kids because they're not getting laid. They're like, I'm getting laid and I want to keep getting laid. So I'm going to go and buy some more guns. And if I see anybody that looks like they're not getting laid, I might shoot them, but I'm not going to start a civil war. I've got kids to feed. I've got work to go to. I've got stuff to do. They're not going to start a civil war because some guy shot up a mall because he couldn't get laid. It's not like being a martyr and doing gas booting are two separate things. Like, sure, if you went in front of town hall and lit yourself on fire, or 100 supposed incels went in front of City Hall and lit themselves on fire and wrote a manifesto, you'd probably get more attention that way. Positive attention, real attention, where people are going to look and say, why are people doing this, than gas booting people at the mall. I'm sorry. That's just how it works. So I also disagree with your dehumanizing propaganda language of calling people sheeple. Everybody has problems in life. And it's not their fault that their parents forced them to go to public school, so they were trained to believe in the government and anything that the mainstream media says. And especially if they have to go to work and take care of their families, maybe they don't have time to spend online researching deep into what's going on in society and the Rothschilds and the Illuminati and all that type of stuff. So to claim that they're culpable just by being ignorant of something, you're thinking just like the so-called elite. The so-called elite puts a hidden message in a random sci-fi movie, and then they wash their hands of it like, well, yeah, we warned them about the technocratic takeover by making Lawnmower Man in 1993, so now it's the masses' own fault if they let us build killer robot armies. As if it's really Joe Bag of Donuts' fault when he spends 80 hours a week at work, another 20 hours a week fixing his house, doing yard work, and spending time with his family. One could just as easily say it's your fault for not being able to become the world's top YouTuber and disseminating all this information, all these red pills, to people. Or one could say that it's your fault that you can't earn enough money to fund Zeitgeist Eater's entire project on your own. So maybe you should just kill yourself. Because I could say it's your fault that you're not rich and you can't pay Zeitgeist Eater $10 million a year to finish the MGTOW Mirror project. Now, I'm asking this question in all seriousness, although it might come across as being condescending, but have you ever lived in a dangerous place like a gang-controlled neighborhood, a third world country, or an actual war zone? Are you really sure that you want to live in a war zone? Because you have to pay taxes and you can't get pussy. I mean, there are people that live in much worse conditions. Places that are so poor that kids play soccer with crushed soda cans. Places that are so bad that you have to have a 10-foot wall surrounding your house just to keep out bandits. Places that are so bad that you have to have an entourage of people with guns just to go to the store to pick up water. I mean, if you think not getting laid is that bad that it warrants that you have no reason to live, will you really be able to handle living in a war zone in an extended civil war? And I mean, this is a legitimate question. I mean, have you ever really lived in like a gang neighborhood where like you go to the gas station and there's 15 gang members hanging outside the store, and you know for sure that they all have guns, and they're all willing to shoot, and they have no problem going to jail because when they go to jail, they get to like meet up with their uncles and their cousins and stuff. They don't get raped in jail. They hang out with their friends in jail, so they have no problem shooting you. And then you've got to get out of your car at 2:00 in the morning and go into the gas station to pay for gas while there's 15 gang members standing outside the gas station. I mean, if you've ever lived like that, let me know. So, another point that you should know if you research supposed conspiracy thing is that the gas booters are just useful idiots for the government. I mean, let's take an example. Let's look at how the government used the Taliban. First, they had them as the Mujahideen, and they used them to fight their own wars against Russia. They armed them, they trained them to fight against Russia in a proxy war. And then when they were done with them and the war was over, they turned around and used them, and they turned a blind eye to the Taliban terrorists coming into the United States and causing 9/11, and then used that same thing to justify sending men into war. And now you're talking about long-term thinking, but it's been almost 20 years since 9/11, and tyranny has not decreased. In fact, it has ramped up almost to as much as it possibly can in the United States. And since then, has anybody gotten so fed up that they're marching on Washington? Has anybody? I mean, it's been 20 years. They've taken almost all of the Constitution and thrown it out. Has anybody marched on Washington yet? It's been 20 years. 20 years. So how many gas bootings are we going to have to equate to the amount of tyranny that was caused by 9/11? I think a lot. I mean, people were pissed after 9/11 happened. People were joining the military on September 12th, and I don't see anybody responding to gas bootings in that same level of anger and frustration as they did to 9/11. So to claim that increasing gas bootings is gonna bring America so much tyranny that people are just gonna get fed up with it and march on Washington, which again is a pointless endeavor once you look at the type of weapons that the military actually has, instead of talking about rocket launchers and grenades. It's really just showing your lack of understanding of how the government really works. Because if you think that raiding Washington, D.C. with rifles and handguns is going to affect the actual elite, which the politicians are just puppets of the elite. The elite don't work in Washington, D.C. The Koch brothers, do they live in Washington, D.C.? Does George Soros live in Washington, D.C.? Does he work in a government office? No. Was Epstein working in Washington, D.C.? Did he live in a government office? Did he work in a government office? No. These people are puppets for the so-called elite, the corrupt elite. And like I'm saying, you need to address this whole continuity of operations plan. Because when, let's just say, for example, all 300 million United States citizens marched on Washington all at once, they still wouldn't get the guys in the underground military base that are able to drop nuclear bombs from the sky and shoot automated laser from space at us. Okay, so another example is the recent Google leaks by Zach Voorhees. I mean, it can't get any more obvious that big tech companies are manipulating elections and specifically censoring people on the right. Those same people that you claim have all the guns and that are going to win a civil war. But is anyone marching on Washington? Is anyone doing anything but going on Google and YouTube and Facebook and trying to explain how Google and YouTube and Facebook is trying to ban them? You would think that direct election meddling would rouse up a few people, like for instance, those who fought in the actual military to defend the Constitution. Those people whose friends were killed defending the Constitution and have actual military training. You'd think they'd be pretty pissed off about hearing the fact that these left-wing Google people, elite, whatever you want to call them, are actually manipulating the elections and possibly making it so that Trump doesn't get reelected. And they've publicly stated that their plan is to, well, not publicly, but it was released publicly that they stated that their plan was to make sure that Trump doesn't get reelected. And these people have actual military training. These people, their friends were killed in these wars. And are they marching on Washington? Because they're going to be the people that are most likely to win a civil war, is military and ex-military. Not, some conservative guy that, goes to the rifle range a couple times a week the military is going to win a civil war because they're already organized. They know how to fight a war. They know how to fight a war in urban terrain, and they're already united together in their ranks. I mean, even when they leave the military, they still maintain their same rank of hierarchy. So if everything went to crap, they would just form back into whatever ranks and stuff that they had when they were in the military. And they have the training, they have the weapons, they have the body armor and all that stuff. So if anybody's going to win a civil war, it's going to be the military. And the military, by definition, is fascism. And so once the military takes over, we'll be in the most fascist, the most tyrannical government possible. So that's what you're calling for. You're saying that I want to have so much tyranny and so much like fascist government that I'm willing to, I mean, you're not going to win. Like the incels are not going to win against the military. Like it's not going to happen. And you can see they're trying to play nice and they're trying to play by the rules. And you're sitting here online telling people that they need to go out and do gas bootings and possibly shoot one of their family members or one of their children or one of their family members and loved ones or whoever. You know what I'm saying? Like just think about it a little bit more. Like I said, it sounds cool, it sounds good, but when you really, really, really start thinking about it and start thinking it through as to what would actually happen if a civil war kicked off in the United States, it would bring so much tyranny. It would bring so much tyranny, it would be ridiculous. And it wouldn't end because the military would take over. Not just some random conservative guys out in Texas or in Montana that, you know, they have like a ragtag militia of a couple guys. No, these guys have, you know, thousands of hours of like actual battle like under their belt fighting against real people that were trying to kill them. You guys were training at a shooting range. Like they're going to win. And then when they win, the only thing they know is military hierarchy. So we're going to be forced to live under like a military dictatorship. If you bring down the civil government and then the military takes over, then we're all going to be stuck living in a military hierarchy. Like that is fascism. Like we're just all going to be basically either you're going to have to join the military or they're going to shoot you. Like I don't see like, I mean, if you think that's the most moral system, fine. We could argue about that too. But I think that people being free to choose and free to do what they want and build things and be productive outside of just having to train and do push-ups all day and train to kill people, I mean, that could be a way to live. But I mean, even the guys that are in the military or were in the military, they don't want to live like that for the rest of their entire life. That's why they retire from the military and come home and spend time with their family and their kids and stuff like that. Because they don't want to live like that for the rest of their life. And they were in a war. And you're trying to tell me that you want to start a war. And you've never even probably, I don't know, but let me know in the comment section, but you probably never even lived in a dangerous neighborhood. And you're telling me that you want to start a war. So there's so many reasons, like I just listed just a few. I have some other views that I don't want to give people ideas about. But there are a lot of reasons that someone could want to live even though they're not getting pussy. And I've listed a few of them. They can build communities and wait for, you know, politics to get even worse so that there's going to be a subset of conservative women that want to get out of the cities. And then these guys will be ahead of the curve with already having these communities and anarcho-capitalist communities built in rural, low population areas. Or they could spend their time, instead of killing themselves and going to jail, harassing politicians while they're wearing suits and, you know, bring their video cameras down, going down to political offices 100 at a time and saying, hey, I need to talk to you. Hey, I need to talk to you. Hey, I need to talk to you every day for the rest of their life. That's more productive than spending the rest of your life in jail. It's more productive than getting killed. So that's two ideas right there. That's two reasons why somebody that's a so-called incel should not kill themselves. And like I said, I've got more ideas, but some of them I don't want to share, at least right here, because I don't want to give people a bunch of ideas. But I've given enough reasons where you can't say, there's no way now that you can say that there's no reason for a supposed incel to live at all because they can't get pussy. So, if you're going to respond to this, either in the comments or make another video about it, let me know. Other than that, have a good day and go MGTOW.